Yo, what is happening, guys? It's GM Cody back with another video. Late this week, but better late than never. I had a very bad, very bad allergy outbreak last weekend, and it lasted through the beginning of the week. It was really bad. It was probably the worst I've ever had. I basically had like an allergic reaction to something. I'm not even really sure what. I never found out, but essentially, my eyes swell up and swell shut, and I was in excruciating agony for about 4 days. So that was pretty horrible. So I did record a video at the beginning of this week, and I've been playing catch up the rest of this week, doing other stuff that I missed. But as promised, we're doing a video for this week, even though it's Friday, and that's cool. And tonight we're going to be talking about one of my favorite things ever. One of my favorite my favorite fictional universe, my favorite book of all time. We're going to be talking about Dune. Now, this is just one of many copies of Dune I have hanging around here. This is just the first one I saw on the shelf. I do have a couple fancy copies of it, and whatever, but that's just the first one I saw there. Specifically, though, we're going to be talking about this, which you can't tell what this is because this is the sexy special edition that my friend Chase bought me a couple of years back, and thank you very much, Chase. I love this book. This is Dune Adventures in the Imperium, the Dune role-playing game by Moidiphius, and specifically, that's what we're going to be talking about tonight. But we're also going to be talking about we're going to be talking about Dune, too. And, anytime I talk about anything that I love, I got to go into detail about, where I first loved it and why I love it. And Dune's no exception. And Dune truly is one of my favorite things ever, if not my favorite thing. It's definitely my favorite book of all time, just period. I mean, I've read maybe better books or whatever, but it just holds a special place in my heart. I first encountered Dune as a whole, not through the book, but of course, like a lot of us, through the David Lynch movie that came out in the 80s. I saw that movie when I was about 10 years old, and my friend told me about it, that he had watched this awesome movie and that I should watch it, so I rented it from the video store or whatever, and sat down and watched it and just fell in love with it. And then, of course, a couple years later, when I was in middle school, I was probably about 12, the first time I read Dune, and I loved that even more. And ever since then, I've been a fanatical Dune fan. I have read all the books except for the last one. I have not read the last Dune book. And sometime or another, I'll get around to finishing the whole series as a whole. But the first trilogy of books I've read over and over again. I've read them several times, especially the first one. I don't even know. I've probably read at least 10 times or whatever. So I love Dune. And the idea of running a Dune role-playing game has always been in the back of my mind. Ever since I got into gaming and I discovered Dune, I was like, this would... I always thought that would make a really cool universe to game in, and always dreamed and thought about doing it. And of course, there has only ever been one other published Dune role-playing game, and that is the one that was produced by Last Unicorn Games around the turn of the millennium. I think it came out in the year 2000 or 2001. Unfortunately, I don't know the details about that, but unfortunately they had some kind of rights issues, and they only made like 1,000 copies of it, and that was it. So I've never got my hands on that version, and probably never will, because it's ridiculously expensive. But that is really, I have looked at it. I do, I have a copy of it. I acquired a copy of it, and have read through it, and that is a really, really well done rendition of a Dune role-playing game for sure. But I have always wanted something, of course, that is easily accessible and get my hands on. Of course, I've tried my hand at making my own versions of the Dune role-playing game in the past. My notebooks over the years are filled with scribblings of me starting my own like Dune role-playing game and never finishing that project. Not through lack of trying, I might add. But when Moidiphius announced that they were doing their own version of Dune, I was very excited for it. And of course, my friend Chase, bought this for me. He regularly buys me all kinds of things Dune related for Christmases and birthdays and such, and I really appreciate it because he understands my love of Dune. So I've had this book in my possession since it came out, basically, but have not got around to running it. Well, recently, so this really started with Bear's Star Trek games. Funny enough. So Bear started running, the Star Trek Sojourner game, which I'm playing in. If you haven't checked that out, go check it out. I am simulcasting it on my channel as well. And that's been really awesome. Sorry. Let me get a drink real fast. And basically, what that game clicked into my brain is what I really love about role-playing games is role-playing. I really love the role-playing aspect. That's what I miss the most about it, is getting into a character and, really getting into the role of a character and putting yourself in that headspace and role-playing a character. That's what I really love about role-playing games, and that game really made me realize that's the aspect that I love the most, that I kind of forgot about. The other thing it made me realize is, hey, maybe I want to run a Star Trek game myself. So I did think about it. I was planning to run a Star Trek game, and I was in the works of doing that. And then Bear announced that he was going to run a second Star Trek game, which I don't know if I should be saying that or not, because I don't know if he's announced it. I don't think it really matters. But he announced he's going to do a second Star Trek game. So I'm like, okay, well, he's running 2 Star Trek games. Our audiences do have some bleed over. If I'm running a Star Trek game, I think that would just be a little too much Star Trek. So I was like, well, maybe I'm not going to run Star Trek, because I think it would just be a little too much. It'd be Star Trek overload, right? And also, he's doing such a damn good job of it. I don't know if I could really, match what he's doing, or even want to, really. So I think I'm just going to let him do the Star Trek, and I definitely want to run a Trek game maybe sometime in the future, but I'll let this run its course first. But those Star Trek games got me thinking about, well, Bear is so passionate about Star Trek. What is the science fiction universe that I'm so passionate about that I think I could really, put all my efforts into? What kind of sci-fi game could I really put all my love and efforts into that I love that much that I would be so passionate about? And the answer is Dune. Dune would be the equivalent universe for me. And so I was like, well, so I dusted off the Dune book, which I hadn't really looked at too thoroughly until recently. And we're going to look at it tonight as well. We're going to scan through it. So yeah, I was like, you know what? I should run a Dune game. So that's what I'm doing. So I've got 3 players right now, and I am kind of looking for a 4th. So if you're really interested, hit me up. But if we can't find a 4th, that's fine. We're just going to play with 3. I think that's plenty enough for a Dune game. And we've been doing basically a session 0 in my Discord, which I don't invite a lot of people to, because I just use it for planning games and stuff. I don't really use it just to bullshit or anything. I can do that in other people's Discords. I just use it to, schedule my games and my streams and stuff like that. So if you're not in my Discord, it's not like a secret or anything. It's not like there's nothing really going on there. And I don't really plan to make it anything. I don't really have time to fuck around with a Discord, at least not right now. And there's plenty of other Discords. I just don't really see a reason for me to have, a Discord universe or anything. So anyways, needless to say, in the Discord, we've been plotting and planning this Dune game, and it's been really fun just doing like the session zero stuff because I've been letting the players, really do a lot of the world building, for me, which is really interesting. I've done that in the past with other games, and this game is no exception. Basically, they are going to be members of a minor house that have just risen to minor house status. And that was all, the information I gave them. It's basically going to be the rise and maybe fall of of a house from almost unknown minor status to hopefully reaching great heights in the Imperium and beyond. So they, the first questions I presented to them was, what do you want to create? Create your house. Like, tell me about your house. Like, where's their homeworld? What is their homeworld like? What commodities do they have a monopoly on? And what do they like? And, all this stuff. And they just went hog fucking wild on this thing. And it's really awesome. Like, it's really, really cool how they just started bringing this world to life with me just giving them a few prompts. And so they've created this whole fleshed out world, that we're going to play in. And of course, I'm filling in the details that they don't fill in. But honestly, these guys and gals are all so creative that they've really come up with something really cool. So I think it's going to be really interesting. And I'm already having fun creating this, our own little Dune universe here before we even play, which is really interesting and really fun. And it's an exercise I haven't done in a while with players. And it's that is an exercise that doesn't really work with every group. I knew it would work with this group because I was dealing with, 3 people that are very creative and like creating things and like coming up with ideas and like participating in that way. But there's a lot of groups that would not enjoy that certain thing. So, with a different group, I wouldn't necessarily do that. But in this game, I just felt like that would be really interesting for them to create the house and create where they come from and tell me about the environment and all that stuff. And then I'll kind of populate the rest of the universe, their enemies and the major house that they're a vassal to and all the other, I've been kind of like filling in the details as far as like, who are the other like NPCs in the household, the Retuan of the noble house and all that stuff. So it's been really cool, and I will definitely give you guys some more details about that as they come. I haven't decided if I'm going to stream that game yet or not. To be honest with you, I'm getting kind of tired of streaming games. It's a lot of pressure for really no gain. I find I find that most people don't really enjoy that sort of thing. So I know some people haven't been enjoying some of the streams I've been doing, but I don't think it's enough. And I just overall, I don't think people enjoy watching people play role-playing games. And I don't think this would be any different. And I think it would just be a better experience for all of us if we just didn't have that pressure of having to stream to an audience and entertain an audience, and it could just sit down and really get in, with just us four, really get into this really cool, deep role-playing experience in the Dune universe and not have to worry about all that shit. So if I don't stream it, what I'm probably going to do is do recaps on the channel and narrate them maybe from one of the characters' point of views, or I might have them guest star, narrate, give a recap of the session. So I'm actually thinking about that's what I'm going to do, and actually put pictures and stuff up and do this kind of talking narration of these little short recaps of the session and what's happening in the legacy of their noble house. So look forward to that. I think that'll be really fun if I don't stream it. I haven't decided yet. But anyways, I am very jazzed about playing Dune. What's interesting is, I hear a lot of people say that it seems like a lot of people are really intimidated by gaming in the Dune universe. And I guess I kind of understand that, because Dune is a very heady, universe, right? It's not, this isn't Star Wars. This is, even Star Trek is lighthearted compared to Dune, and Star Trek can be some deep stuff, but Dune is can be some really heady stuff. And I could definitely see why it intimidates some people, because a lot of people feel like you need to know everything about Dune in order to run a Dune game. Which luckily I know a lot about Dune, so that's not, I'm not worried about that. But even to play in a Dune game, I've asked some people and they're just like, oh, I just don't know enough about Dune to play in a Dune game. But I don't think that's necessary, especially with the, depending on the type of game you're running. Like in my Dune game, I'm running it basically around or before the same period of the first book. So that means that really the only knowledge you would have to have is what's contained, in the original book. Or if you've seen one of the movies, you probably have enough information there, and I could fill in the gaps for you of what it's all about. So I don't think people should be as intimidated playing a Dune game or running a Dune game as they seem to be. I also hear a lot of people say that they don't see the point in running a Dune game. They don't see a lot of potential there, a lot of stories. As opposed to me, I see tons of potential there and tons of stories and alternatives. Because Dune is like an expansive universe. And if you just take it, for the setting, you don't have to base it on Arrakis and Dune and have the Fremen and House Harkonnen and the Atreides and, fish speakers and all that stuff. You don't have to have any of that. Our Dune game is not going to be on Arrakis. It's going to be on a rainforest moon that orbits a gas planet. So it's going to be a totally different take on. It's going to be our own Dune verse, but it's still going to follow, the rules of the Dune universe. So you're going to have shields and the Spacing Guild and Mentats and all that stuff, but it's not going to be, on Arrakis or Dune. Well, as of yet, maybe sometime in the future we might get to Arrakis, but right now it's taking part. We're creating our own stories within the Dune universe, and the Dune universe is so wide open. I think you could easily do that. So I don't see any problems with that. I will say you have to use a certain amount of imagination to do it, because the Dune novels are very centered and focused around Arrakis and Dune. But they do talk about other planets and stuff. So I think in other cultures and people and things, that I think it gives you enough information to build off of that foundation. So anyways, I think there's plenty of room there to run a game in the Dune universe. And I'm quite excited to do so, actually. I think it's going to create a really good game. And I think it's going to create some really interesting role-playing opportunities. So I'm really excited. So anyways, let's kind of look at, I guess you could call this, I'm not going to call this a review per se. Even the only reason I wouldn't say this is a review is only because I have not played this game yet. I would not give a proper review of a game or say yay or nay, thumbs up or thumbs down on a game unless I've actually played it. I've only read through this book. I have not played it yet. So I do not know what my final verdict on the actual game system is yet. But so far, I will just say up front, I like what I see. I think it looks pretty cool. And the 2D20 system by Moidiphius, I am not wholly familiar with. This is my first, well, I guess now my second encounter with it. My first encounter really was the Star Trek role-playing game, but that was just a few weeks ago when I picked up that book and started playing in that game and started learning. And, I'm just now learning the 2D20 system, so I don't know all the ins and outs of the rules. I haven't played the Dune game yet. I have played Star Trek a little bit, a couple sessions. So far I can say that the 2D20 system is fine. I don't love it. I don't hate it. I do think it's interesting. It's a different, I could say it's different at least. It's a different system. It sets itself apart for sure. But I will say that Moidiphius so far as like Star Trek and Dune, they've done a really good job of, capturing the spirit of a lot of these IPs. So, and yeah, so that's my really. This is just going to be my first thoughts and just looking at the book and letting you guys see it and kind of just talking about the game a little bit. Pretty much what I normally do, right? Except I hadn't played this game, which is the point I was trying to make in that long-winded explanation. Okay, so here we go. Dune Adventures in the Imperium, the role-playing game, and a really, really nice cover. The Moidiphius books, I have to say, fantastic artwork overall. Like, really love the art, and this cover is no exception. This art is really cool. So yeah, this uses the 2D20 system. I will say, I don't know if this is the case with all their games, and I assume it is. This is definitely a different take on the 2D20 system than what Star Trek is. I would call this more of a narrative take on the system as opposed to a gamey take on the system. They really went for like a narrative play game here, which is appropriate for Dune, I would say. All right. Well, here's some more cool art. Fremen, and it looks like a sandworm rising out of the desert. Or it might be a storm. No, it's a sandworm. So basically, the first part of this book is just talking about the Dune universe, which I'm not going to go into. If you don't know anything about the Dune universe, there are plenty of videos on YouTube that could explain it better than me. So I'm not going to go through a lot of this. I'm going to skip past a lot of it. I will be talking about certain things as we go through here. This is one thing I wanted to touch on was right off the get-go, they talk about this agents and architects style of play. Now, I find this really cool, and it's a really good way to play the game. That you can play, the heads of, the ones pulling the strings or the ones at the end of the strings, right? I should say, first off, let's get this straight. The whole concept of this game is that you are playing the Rechuan, the entourage, the members of a noble house. You're the agents working for the house. You could also be playing the heads of the household, but they kind of want you to build up to that. So, like, you might be the Mentat. You might be a Mentat, but you're not the Mentat of the house. You're just a Mentat under another Mentat or whatnot. Though they present this way of play that you could be the heads of the household and making all these diplomatic deals and doing all the, backstabbing and all that stuff. And then you could, switch to agent play and have side characters where you go off on these missions and stuff. Doing, whatever it may be. So I like that it explains to you that there are like two ways to play this game. The way I'm running my game is somewhere in between because the players are a very newly established minor house. They don't have the luxury of having a bunch of agents and a Rechuan to go off and do a lot of things. So they're going to have to get their hands dirty most of the time, and they are going to be the heads of the household, though they are not the rulers of the household. So I'm kind of doing a little bit in between. Also, I'm allowing them to make secondary characters in case they get into some kind of situation or mission that's not appropriate for one of their characters. They can just bring along, a household guard or a lieutenant or what have you. All right, so it does, it does talk about these things. And I think it's cool, though, that right off the bat it explains that there's several ways to play this game. And again, the art in this book is really cool. It talks about the different eras of Dune. And really, you could play this in any era. My game in particular, I'm setting sometime way before the first book, probably 100 to 200 years before. But it would still be, the same kind of setup as the first book, really. But you could set it in any era, and I don't think it really assumes that you're going to be playing in any specific era, though it sort of presumes that you're probably playing in the era of the original book with the way it presents things. Example play, what have you, some more really good art. The known universe, this is where it starts talking about, the whole Dune universe. And it does a really good job of explaining the Dune universe if you are a newbie to Dune in particular. This book does really sum up a lot of the things about Dune really well. There's a few things in here that I'm like, they could have worded that better or whatever, but overall I think they did a really good job of summing all this up. Talking about, the Imperium and how the Imperium started in the Butlerian Jihad, and they have a timeline here of all that stuff. Talking about more about the Imperium, the Spice, and the Spacing Guild, Chom, the Sardaukar, the Emperor, technology, and how technology is different in Dune, which is very important. Now, I will say that there are a lot of things in Dune that are speculative that, that are, like Frank Herbert never really, went into great detail and links about. So they do make some, in this book, in this game, they make some, what would you call it? Artistic licenses about certain things that probably are not in Dune. But you could easily ignore those things. Or you could include things that you think, really you could shape and mold the Dune universe however you like it, I think, in a lot of different ways. And they do a little bit in this game. For example, like tanks. They talk about like having tanks in Dune. Well, there really is no mention of tanks in the original book series. I don't know about the, Kevin J. Anderson, Brian Herbert books, which I don't particularly care for. I've only read a couple of them. They might have tanks in those books, but like in the canon, like in my canon Dune universe, which is, I go by the original books, there's no tanks or anything that are mentioned. But it's not out of the realm of possibility, right? But that's not how I would play it. So that's just one example, and there's a couple other things in here that they kind of like say, well, maybe there's this, maybe there's that, and it's not like they say it's in there. They just say, oh, they mention these things here and there. But they do a pretty good job of laying down what the technology of Dune and all. The great schools, they talk about the Bene Gesserit and the Suk school and the Sword Masters of Gunaz and the Mentats, faith and religion, go into Orange Catholicism and other faiths, in the galaxy. Talk about the Landshroud and the caste system, and all the noble houses. It explains all the legal proceedings and stuff. The War of Assassins, because in Dune, open warfare is generally prohibited between houses, so they do this constant war of assassins. And I think it does a really good job of explaining all that. They talk about a lot of the major players, major houses, House Carino, House Harkonnen, Atreides. And talks about some of the planets here, like Ix and the Talaxu, Chom, all that good stuff. The Spacing Guild. This is really cool. The Mentats. That's a really cool one, too. I really love this Bene Gesserit with the blue eyes. She's awesome with the knife behind her back. They talk about the Bene Gesserit, of course. And, of course, the classic litany against fear. I must not fear. Fear is the mind killer. Fear is the little death and brings total obliteration. I'll face my fear. I'll permit it to pass over and through me. When it's gone past, I will turn the inner eyes, see its path. Where the fear is gone, there will be nothing. Only I will remain. The Bene Tai Laxu. they go all through the different schools and stuff. And gives you a little bit overview of all the famous planets in Dune. Arrakis, of course, Dune itself, which it goes into great length about, and the Fremen and the worms. And then it gives you an overview of some of the other planets. Caladan, which is the homeworld of House Atreides. Giedi Prime, the homeworld of House Harkonnen. Ix, Kaitain, which is the homeworld of the Emperor. Junction, which is the homeworld of the Spacing Guild. Poritrin, Rachis, Seleucus Secundus, Talaxu, Wallach 9, and I think that's it, like all the planets it talks about it. But if you were not familiar with, Dune, this would give you a good idea, like the major player planets, I guess, and then kind of like give you some ideas to create your own, which is cool. And then we get into the actual like game. And so the first thing you do is, like, I was talking about earlier in the video, is create your house. And encourages, the players and the GM to cooperatively talk about what their house is going to be all about. Now, in the basic book, the house economics or bookkeeping or systems, if you will, are very abstract and very simple. So if you're looking for like a really deep, bookkeeping system for your house and stuff, it's not in this book. But there is a source book, which I can't remember the name of. I do have the PDF of it. I think it's Houses of the Landstrad. And it goes into a much deeper system for like all that stuff, like keeping track of your house. And it actually has, all those systems to do that. And I think we're probably going to use that in my game just because the Mentat is kind of interested in like really going full Mentat and wanting to bookkeep and all that stuff. So we might use those systems in my game. But in this game, it's pretty simplified. So you kind of decide what your house is going to be, what your house is. So you kind of decide, what kind of player the house is. Are they a nascent house, a brand new minor house, a house minor, an established minor house, a house major, or one of the great houses. And then you develop a certain amount of threat per a player. We'll talk about threat a little bit later. But basically, this is kind of like a currency the GM can use against the players during a session. And the greater your house is, the more threat it generates, which is kind of cool. And then the next thing, you got, your players and you would determine is your domains for your house. And every, like in Dune, every house in Dune has some kind of monopoly, mercantile power and chome shares in certain things. And this is, this is no different, right? So you pick something that you kind of have a monopoly over. And the greater your house is, the more domains you have. You have a certain amount of primary and secondary domains. And it does a really good job of giving examples of what the domains are. And they could be anything like... It has some really cool ones in here, like the artistic ones. Maybe you have expertise in playwrights and poets and directors or actors and philosophy. It's not just items or, commodities. It could actually be like people and stuff, which is really cool, really interesting. It's something I really wouldn't have thought of, actually. And I think that's really cool. So, espionage, you could produce, surveillance devices or spy masters or assassins, or you could produce farming equipment, industries, of course, military weapons, political stuff, religion, science, so it gives a lot of really good examples for all kinds of different things that you could pick out for your domains. And then, of course, the next thing you would think about is your homeworld. Like I was talking about, my players created a very elaborate setting so far. It's gotten pretty out of control, but it's awesome. They created a rainforest moon around a gas planet, and it is not their homeworld. Their homeworld's somewhere else. And they're, of course, a minor house. They've just been established as a minor house. And they are going to be put in charge of this moon. And the domain there that they have acquired is basically like a superfruit that grows on these trees on the side of mountains, on the terraces of these mountains. It's a mountainous, rainforest type moon. So that's the home world they came up with, sort of. That's going to be their home base, and it tells you to come up with that. The other thing is banner and a coat of arms, and of course my players are still talking about that, I think. But you come up with your own coat of arms and whatnot, and then you pick out some traits that describe your house. And I like the traits, and the traits don't really have any like mechanical purpose per se, but I think it's good way to just give like character to something, to just give it a trait. And it does that a lot in this game. You just give things traits, and it can say a lot about what a thing is, and I like that a lot. So you would say maybe my house is secretive or honorable or whatever, and so you give your house some traits. And then you should fill in the roles of the house and the household. So that it gives what the different roles are, and it tells you that the players probably should be playing these roles, that they should be striving to get into these roles. But it also says that maybe you could, and in my game they will be taking on a lot of these roles because they are a minor house. But they kind of say that you probably shouldn't play that way, but hey, whatever. You can run the game however you want. And it goes over the different roles, the ruler, the consort, the advisor, physician, counselor, envoy, heir, marshal, scholar, spy master, sword master, also weapon master. They kind of cram those two together. Treasurer and the war master. And then, of course, any roles that the players don't take on, they should have NPCs that fulfill those, right? And then you go to enemies. And again, depending on the strength of your house, determines what kind of enemies they have and how powerful your enemy is. Because my players are a house minor, they have one other minor house that is their enemy. And then, of course, you can roll to see all the details about the enemy house. Even though you don't have to, you could just pick out some stuff. But I might make my players roll. We've already established, I haven't come up with the enemy house all the way, but we've established that basically this moon has this super fruit on it. And that is the reason, the house major that my players are vassal to are sending them to this moon. But they're going to have dual stewardship with another minor house. And they're going to compete for control of this moon. And whoever comes up on top within a certain amount of time will control the whole moon as their world, and will have direct control over all the assets of the moon and be the stewards of the moon. So that's kind of the conflict there with in my game. But you could come up with your own conflict, of course. Then we go into creating characters. So, of course, it talks about, you should come up with a concept for your character and who your character is. It does have two ways to make characters. It has plan creation and creation in play. Now, I don't know a lot about the creation and play because it kind of weirds me out, but basically you just answer a few questions and you create your character as you play the game, which I don't really see the point in that, but hey, whatever. And then plan creation is like we all know and love, is where you actually, sit down and make a damn character, which is what I prefer. But the creation and play is also an option, and it's interesting. I guess it allows people to just sit down and just be like, hey, we want to play this game tonight, and just play and not have to worry about making characters. But to be honest, characters in this game are pretty simple to make, so I see no reason why it would take very long to make characters. So this, traits that make up a character, I'm actually going to go to the back of the book real quick to show you this stuff instead of going through all this, because I think it would be easier just to look at a character sheet. Basically, you have your drives and you have your skills. You have drives, skills, talents, assets, and that's about it. So your drives are basically your attributes in any other role-playing game. And your highest drives have a statement. And we'll get into the mechanical thing about that, but if you're using a drive that has that agrees with what your statement is, then basically you can use a point of determination, which is basically kind of like a luck point or a fate point or a Benny, sort of, in any other game. And it will give you a bonus to your die. I think it gives you a bonus die, basically, if I remember right. You also have skills. And there's only 5 skills: battle, communicate, discipline, move, and understand. And you have focuses, which are specialized skills under those broad categories. I do like that. I think that's pretty cool and a good way to break it up. And it works pretty well. And basically, when you make a roll, you pick a drive, and the GM picks a skill. You add those two together, and that's the roll you need to get equal to or under on a D20. And usually you roll in 2D20. That's why it's called the 2D20 system. Talents are special abilities, essentially. And assets, of course, are not just items. They're very important items. So that basically sums up, what makes up a character. And I'm going to kind of skip ahead. Well, how are we looking on time? We're already at like 45 minutes. I've been talking a lot. That's okay, though. It's Friday night. Basically, the way you create a character, you apply set ratings to your skills. Well, first you pick if you're going to play a faction template, and you pick an archetype. So a faction template is you belong to a certain faction that's very specific. So these are the faction templates. You don't have to pick one of these, but you can. The Bene Gesserit Sisterhood, of course, the Fremen, Mentats, Spacing Guild Agent, Sook Doctor, and that's it. So that's all the faction templates that are in the book. You could make up your own, and I think there are some other ones in the other books. It'd be pretty easy to make up your own, though. And basically all a faction template gives you, it gives you some talent, some special talents that are specific to that faction that you can pick and otherwise you couldn't have. But the one thing about it is there is always a mandatory talent that you have to pick at character creations. So that's the only thing it gives you. You get some selections of some special talents, essentially. And then the archetypes kind of determine how your skills are going to go. So that's what we're about to get into. So basically, the first thing you do is, pick if you're going to pick a faction. If not, that's fine. Pick an archetype, which we'll look at the archetypes a little bit here in a minute. Then you assign ratings to each of your skills. Your primary skill is 6. Next skill, secondary skill for your archetype is 5. All other skills are rated at 4. Then you add 5 more points amongst your skills to a maximum of 8. So if we go down here to archetypes, there are a whole list of them. And I'll tell you primary skill, secondary skill. And this is stuff like analyst, athlete, commander, duelist, scholar, scout, So there's a whole plethora of them. Then the next thing you do is you pick talents. You get 3 talents. Of course, like I was just talking about, if you picked one of the faction templates, you have a mandatory talent that you have to pick. And Sorry, my throat's really dry. And you have to, you can't pick talents that are specific to a faction. Then the next thing you do is determine your drives, and you assign ratings 8, 7, 6, 5, and 4, with 8 being the most important. And then you assign a statement to the 3 highest drives. Then you begin with 3 assets, and then you choose a trait. You decide your ambition, which is like your personal goal that you're trying to meet, and work out personal details, and you are done making your character. So we already talked about the archetypes, so we can skip past these. Skills, we talked about that. Focuses, talents, drives, yeah. And here's like an example finished character. Here's all the talents, and basically these give you like special abilities. They actually have like very, very good like mechanical purposes, in the game. And again, there are specific ones for the different types of factions, which I think this is a good way to distinguish between, make the Mentats good at what they do and make the Bene Gesserit good at what they do, etc., etc. But also, you can create a really cool character without being from one of those factions as well. And then we get into the creation and play system, which, again, I'm not really familiar with. I have not read through this at all because it just did not interest me. It might be pretty cool, and I'm not really going to look at it too much right now, to be honest with you. But basically what it is you create a character as you play. You determine a few quick things, and then as you're playing, you start playing and you fill in the blanks as you play, essentially. Supporting characters, this is what I was talking about, where you create you don't create like a whole nother character to play. They're very simple, stripped down characters that players can play. And they would either be a minor supporting or a notable supporting character. Character advancement. You do get advancement points, and you can spend those, of course, to get more skills and talents and assets and whatnot. The rules. So the rules of this game are pretty interesting. We're not going to go real in depth. I'm not going to explain to you the 2d20 system because I don't really know all the ins and outs of it yet either. But essentially what you do is, again, you add your drive, you add your skill together. The GM is going to set a certain difficulty, and that's how many successes you need. You start off with 2d20. You can get more d20 through certain ways. You can get momentum or drive points, or through getting critical successes in your rolls. And essentially, you're trying to roll equal to or under your target number, which is your, drive plus skill. And yeah, that's basically the core of the system when you do everything. So if you roll a 1, it's critical success. It's worth 2. If you roll more successes than what the difficulty is, you garner momentum. And momentum is a pool for the whole group, and you can have a maximum of 6 momentum in the pool at a time. And at the end of every scene, right, point of momentum goes out of the pool. But you can take those momentum and do different things with them, like add dice and gain different information and whatnot. And again, I'm not going to go through like the real like nitty gritty of the system, but I wanted to give you like some kind of indication about how it works if you're not familiar with the 2d20 system. Here it's talking about momentum and buying extra dice. We talked about determination and the drive statements. We didn't talk about the drive statements though, but basically, you pick a short statement with your drives, and it's basically how you feel about that drive. again, they're trying to go for a very storytelling and role-playing, narrative-heavy game. So, yeah. And there's more to it than that as well, to the drive statements. You can recover drives. You can lose drives when you spend them. And you can also change them. So here's some more stuff about momentum. Different things you can do. You can buy, of course, more D20s. You can create a trait. You can create an asset, which is really interesting. You can basically pull an asset out of thin air. Now, it is worth noting that an asset in this game can be anything. It doesn't have to be a tangible object. It can be a person or a piece of information even, or something you know. So that's really cool. So, of course, you have to have some reason why you would have an asset, and then you can make that asset permanent by spending more momentum. You can also just obtain information with momentum. Complications are just complications like they sound, and they could add some difficulties to what you're doing at the time. And, of course, you gain a complication when you roll a 20. And this creates like a trait that and you have to overcome that complication, or there might be some penalties or whatnot. Threat, again, is the kind of the GM currency, and usually I'm not too big on the GM currency thing, and I don't even know if I'm going to use threat, to be honest with you, just because I just am not a big fan of this sort of thing, and it's hard for me to keep track of when I'm running a game, and I don't really want to keep track of it. But I might try it the first couple sessions and see if I can get into it. But essentially, you can the players, instead of spending momentum, they can spend threat to do certain things, so they can buy extra D20s, get over a complication or whatnot, and then the GM can use that threat to do much of the same things that the players can do, as well as just create complications or escalations or whatnot. Determination, we kind of talked about this a little bit. And you can use determination to buy an extra 1 re-roll declaration or an extra action. Contest, this is any kind of like opposed roll, right? And this includes combat too, which we'll get into a little bit. Extended tasks, you need a certain, like most role-playing games, you just need a certain amount of successes to overcome that task. Some more cool art here. Looks like a Fremen fighting a Sardaukar. Conflict. So I do like how it goes into conflict in this. And basically, it's kind of like an opposed roll, and whoever wins the contest is, if you win the contest, you're successful. As far as like combat goes, I'm going to be skipping over a lot of things in this section, just because I don't want to drag this out too much. But some of the combat mechanics are kind of interesting to me. So one thing is there's no initiative. So the players always go first. Or I'm sorry, the GM picks a player. They go first. The player does their actions. Then that player picks one of the GM's opponents, one of his opponents, and he goes next, and it goes back and forth like that. So that's really interesting. Combat's essentially an opposed roll. If the attacker wins, they deal damage. So the way damage works is really interesting in this game. If the player is fighting against a very minor, like mook NPC, and they win the combat, the mook is dead. If they are fighting against a very significant NPC, or if the GM is fighting against a player character, then it counts as an extended task, and you have to acquire a certain amount of successes. Well, you get a certain amount of points. You get 2 points plus the quality of your item every time you succeed. And of course, you have to acquire a certain amount of successes equal to the opposing person's highest skill rating that's appropriate for the contest. So if it's a combat contest, it would be battle, obviously. I don't remember all the skills offhand here. So if it's a social contest, it'd be communicate, right? If it's like a piloting contest, like you had two ornithopters chasing each other, it'd be move, et cetera, et cetera. So that's a really cool way to do things, I think. And it's very narrative. And it goes through all the different types of contests. So it goes through skirmishes, which is multiple enemies fighting each other, dueling. And it goes through different things you can do in dueling without making it too overcomplicated, which is really cool. We just talked about skirmishes, espionage, and how, if you're playing the architect level of play, you could actually be, sending off spies and stuff to do different things. And you have to, get through these different zones and whatnot. It's pretty cool. Warfare, of course, you could have, battles, and it works just the same as any other conflict with your troops moving across sections, which is cool. Intrigue works the exact same way, basically. And then it starts talking about assets. And the assets are really cool because they don't have, so, for example, again, an asset can be anything from a Kriz knife to a shield, personal shield, to an ornithopter, to blackmail information, or a spy. It is like your personal spy, or maybe a handmaiden or something. So an asset can be anything, and it's not saying this is all the items you own. It's saying these are your most prized and personal items, and they're probably a cut above the rest. And assets also have a quality, and that adds to it gives you a bonus when you're using that item. And it goes all through the different assets, and weapons and stuff, again, don't have damages. It's the quality of the asset that determines if it deals more damage or not. So I think that's really cool, and it's really really narrative, really cool. I like all the narrative aspects of the game, for sure. I think it really lends itself well to Dune. Warfare assets, of course, soldiers and different types of soldiers, shield troops, and it's even got Sardaukar in here, which I don't think, whatever. Transports, artillery, and anti-aircraft. Espionage assets like the Hunter Seeker and dart guns. Different types of drugs like the Samuda. What is this? Communications. Contacts and agents like assassins or spies. Face dancer. Intrigue like favors, debt, an old friendship, service, valuables, land rights, raw goods, manufactured goods, blackmail, like we were talking about, contacts, courtiers, all kinds of different things. Really cool. And then it has a pretty good game mastering section. There's some very new agey, gamey kind of stuff in here, but there is also some good information in here. I just kind of glossed over all the shit I didn't care about and looked at the shit I did care about. And there is some really good information in here about setting up a game and running specifically a Dune game and how to handle certain things in a Dune game that would come up, that would be problems. All the things you're thinking about are pretty much touched on in here. And it's a pretty good little section about all that. Allies and adversities, and it has a lot of the famous characters from the books in here, all the notable people from House Atreides, and all the people from House Harkonnen. And it also has, you know, the Imperial House Carino in here and his household. And it's got the famous Fremen in here. And then it has, you know, tells you how to make NPCs. And archetypes. These are just like generic NPCs, essentially. And it has a pretty good selection of different NPCs in here. Pretty much anything you would ever use in a Dune game, except for like creatures. I don't think there's any rules for sandworms and stuff in here, but I don't think you really need rules for a fucking sandworm. It's just, yeah, you're dead, right? But it doesn't have any like different like creatures or anything in here. It's mainly just different types of people. But it could give you an idea of how to like write those stats up if you need them. But in a Dune game, you're not really going to encounter a lot of that kind of stuff anyways. Some good stuff overall, and the art's really cool again. And then it kind of like talks about, you know, creating rival houses for your players. And I think there is even an adventure in here at the end. Yes, Harvesters of Dune. And this one is actually based on Dune in Arrakis. And assumes a lot of things, but it's like an introductory adventure. I have briefly read through this, and it looks pretty good overall. And then conclusion. And appendix. And a character sheet. And that is basically Dune Adventures in the Imperium. Again, I didn't go into as much detail as I usually went into, but I think I gave you guys enough of an overview. You know, I always like going through the whole book so you guys can look for yourselves if you haven't looked at it, which, you know, because I like to look at those things before I buy something. And I'm sure you guys do too. And also my first impressions, which, you know, I already said at the beginning of the video. I think my first impressions are I really like the looks of this game. I really like the direction it went in. I think it's really cool. I think another thing I didn't speak on is I think it did a really good job of melding the different mediums of Dune. So they kind of blended the new movie, 2020 movie Dune, excuse me, with the books really well. I think they did a really good job of kind of melding both of those, and you know, like the new Dune books too. You know, they even have the stuff in there from Kevin J. Anderson and stuff, but it's not heavy on that stuff. But it's in there. Like, you know, they do make it clear that you could play in that Dune verse if you wanted to, and this game definitely would allow you to. So yeah, my first thoughts and overall feeling so far is I'm really excited to run this game. I'm looking forward to it. I like the looks of it. And I think it's going to be a really fun game. I don't think this is a game for everybody, of course. This would definitely be for people that like a lot of heavy role-playing game and narrative aspects, I think. Even though I do think you could play like a very, you know, a little bit more combat-heavy Dune game. I don't think that's what Dune's all about, and I don't think you're going to get a lot of mileage out of this game. This game's not really built for that. So if that's what you're looking for, Dune's probably not for you. But if you're, you know, looking for, you know, kind of a Game of Thrones, well, if you're looking for Dune, essentially, I think this is going to give you a pretty good experience with that. And we'll see here in the next coming weeks when I start my game, and I'll make sure to keep you guys updated. So until next time, I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. If you did, give me a thumbs up. And tell me what you think of Dune. Do you like the books? Have you played this game? Let me know in the comments below. I like hearing from you guys. Anyways, we'll talk to you later. Hope you guys have a good night. Peace.